DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, forget about British law. Let's talk about Sharia law, because apparently a third of the country's Muslims want Sharia law to be implemented by 2044. Yes, there is a new poll that has found that almost a third of British Muslims think it would be desirable to implement this Sharia law within the next 2 decades. So this survey was carried out by JL Partners, and it found that 50% of 1,000 British Muslims have a very positive view of Hamas, and 14% of them said that they have a quite positive view of Hamas. Well, that's a little bit scary, isn't it? Lordy, I mean, my producer yesterday brought me a sort of fact file about Sharia law because we were talking about the rise of it in France. And within that, I saw that almost a third of our country's Muslims want Sharia law. So I was quite intrigued by this, and I thought, who better to get on to talk about it than Nuraya Khan? She's a journalist, and she's got some views on this because she's come face to face with it. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I've always been watching your appearances and sort of being baffled by what you tell me about what it's really like under Sharia law. Is that something you experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, personally, I had to flee from Sharia law myself when I was kind of dealt with the full brutality of it when it comes to a woman pursuing divorce, because within Sharia law, that right is unilaterally given to a man under strict Islamic law. And so you have to fight tooth and nail, if that, to even be granted one. And it got to the point in my personal case where it just got too dangerous because there's so many other punishments that they can use against you. First and foremost is disobedience towards your husband, and that's what they charged me with, which was essentially about to use a Sharia law to kidnap me and send me back to an abusive husband, whereby I can't leave the house without his permission. And that comes directly from a verse in the Quran itself. And that is how they treat Muslim women out there, because you have no choice to enact any other law, even if you've got a different nationality or you come from somewhere else. You have to use Sharia if you're a Muslim.
All you need to do, right, is utter divorce, divorce, divorce 3 times from the male side in order to enact a divorce under Sharia, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The male just has to pronounce that word 3 times on 3 separate occasions. And it's got to the point now in countries like the UAE and I believe Saudi Arabia as well, where a man can literally just text that to his wife and be like, don't come home.
Oh, just a cheeky WhatsApp, 3 divorces and it's all good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Imran Khan, when he was Prime Minister of Pakistan, did that to his wife.
Oh, did he do it to Jemima? Poor Jemima.
No, he did it. He did it to another British Pakistani lady.
Jemima wouldn't put up with that.
Not at all.
But no, you're right. It's been used time and time again. And the issue with Sharia law is that because it's such an extreme version of Islam, there are things like within this study, when asked about how desirable it was for homosexuality to be outlawed, 17% said it was very desirable and 10% said it was somewhat desirable. I want to bring Myron into this because he's really studied Islam quite closely and he's got a lot of thoughts.
Well, I just wanted to ask Nuraya a question about, there is Adil Ray who came on, he's a Good Morning Britain host, and he basically said that, he championed Mamdani getting elected and sort of said it'll bring in Sharia, which he would say is social justice. So his idea of Sharia is this kind of very benign, liberal kind of social justice. Do you think this is a problem now in the West, that we don't really understand this word Sharia? And when we hear the word Sharia, our gut reaction is that we know it's this kind of 7th century draconian legal system, but it's been painted by the liberal elite media class as being this kind of very benign, cosy, kind of almost left-leaning Green Party type thing that we all want. And do you think that's a problem that's going on in the West at the moment?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's a deliberate tactic that they've all employed. For example, this social justice element to it, where they even term the word jihad as like an internal struggle and not the kind of expansionist agenda that Islam has to, be in a constant state of war with the West or any infidel nation, so to speak. But within that Sharia, which derives itself directly from the Quran, because it's divine law, essentially, you get things like the hudud punishments, which are literally amputations of hands and feet for stealing, theft, throwing homosexuals off of the highest roofs of, buildings, all these kind of things. So it is mind-boggling to me how the left even stand by and champions this. But I think on the part of so-called liberal Muslims, it is a very deliberate tactic to just allow us to kind of, get used to or comfortable with the idea that this is just something part of their religion that's quite benign.
Yeah, can I just ask you, Nora, do you class yourself as a Muslim even now?
Absolutely not, no.
Absolutely not. Do you think there is such a thing as a liberal Muslim?
I think you're in a state of perpetual cognitive dissonance if you're trying to live like that, so no.
That's a good one.
Do you think there is such a thing as a liberal Muslim?
I think you're in a state of perpetual cognitive dissonance if you're trying to live like that, so no.
That's a good word. You're right, because a lot of the teachings are very hard line. I think there are a lot of Muslims that live very peacefully in the United Kingdom, and they don't want to impose anything onto anyone. I think my issue here with this is that we can see that with the implementation of Sharia courts within the country, we've got over 80 of them now. They're not waiting for any legislation to be passed. It seems like a lot of these very extreme sects are just going and doing it. Now, would you say that with this report that's come out, with over a third of the country's Muslims wanting Sharia law implemented, do you think it's going to be something that just happens? Or do you think we need to put some sort of legal framework around it not happening?
I think they're going to continue as they are, and obviously the kind of just the disquiet and on the part of the government makes them more and more emboldened to continue how it's going as a parallel system, if you will. So there's bigamy happening, there's forced marriages happening, there's child marriages happening, there's FGM being propagated as something good and wholesome for certain sects of the religion. And because they know that they can get away with it for so long, it's just something that they will continue to do before it gets kind of wider attention, or we clamp down on it in the way that certain other European countries have decided to.
Yeah, I think the problem is this, that when you have mass immigration, first of all, you have large numbers of people coming from non-European countries, from Muslim predominant countries, they come to Britain. Now, what you do, naturally, migrants will go to where there are other migrants of the same nature, of the same country, same religion. So then you get basically densely populated areas of the country, which are, like Tower Hamlets, for example, almost exclusively Muslim in different parts. Parts of Bradford, 75% Pakistani and so on. And as a result of that, they then vote for their communities. And as they vote for their communities, you get MPs with a first past the post system. So therefore you get sectarian MPs, Islamist MPs. And then that number, Nigel Farage, I think I remember he's saying that will probably, he reckons it's going to go to around 25 MPs by the next general election. Could be more. We have numerous local council MPs as well. So now politics goes, Islamist politics starts entering the frontline politics. And as a result of that, inevitably, the most strongest voices, the most loudest supremacist voices, will eclipse the more liberal voices, or you have people in the middle, like the moderate Muslims, who perhaps just want to go about their lives, eat their sandwiches, earn their money, and all the rest of it, like everybody else. But because they're not hardline liberals, they will not oppose these supremacist and extremist instincts. And as, like, for example, Layla Cunningham from Reform, she's a liberal Muslim, right? I'll describe her as a liberal Muslim, right?
She is.
She identifies as a Muslim, but she rallies against the Islamophobia definition.
And there are actually a lot of Muslim people, especially within Britain, that really do rally against the more extreme stuff, because it's no favour to them to have these extremists that then paint everyone gets painted with the same brush. So you make a very good point. But
so if there isn't enough people like Layla Cunningham stepping forward and really speaking out against this, we will sleepwalk into more increasing Islamisation of Britain. And you asked me, should the state get involved? I think the next government needs to put in safeguards. There needs to be an Islamism bill where we identify what are the supremacist, extremist instincts, the interpretations of the Quran, the Hadith, the biographies of the Prophet, ring-fence that and really put that into legislation and criminalise it, to say that, look, we want to protect liberal Muslims, right? And to protect liberal Muslims, you have to rally against the supremacist, Islamist ideology. 3/4 of our MI5 security caseload is Islamist terrorism, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well over 90%, or I think it's around 87% of obviously terrorist attacks have been Islamic. So it's a big problem for sure for us to tackle over here in Britain. There is a real chasm and a lack of community cohesion with some of these communities that do totally fence themselves off a little bit more. And you know what? I mean, I don't want us to say, oh, let's all hold hands and kumbaya, but I do wish that British values were the centre of all this, not, oh, let's embrace this, let's embrace that. Would you agree with that, Nuraya?
Yeah, absolutely. But you have to remember one really important factor here is that Islam has this element of supremacy built into it. So when you're comparing divine law to man-made law, which in their eyes, that is British law, Sharia wins every single time, hands down. So if you ask somebody on a personal level as well, if they are a devout practicing Muslim, which law do they believe is more just and more equitable and that they would, sooner follow, it would usually be Sharia if they had it their way, all things being equal. And then as the enclaves we see, like where more and more Muslim communities do gather and mass migration takes form, a lot of the women that come over, for example, have no idea that British law is actually more favorable to them, and they just get roped into going to their local mosque or turning to their local imam, or their local Muslim MP directs them to those ways. And so they struggle to get divorces, they don't get custody of their children, whereas British law can enshrine those things for them very easily. And so you've got this complete divide because there's just a complete lack of ignorance as well.
It's such a good point, and I actually read a recent study, or an article actually, about in Vienna, there was one case that happened where they actually acknowledged the Sharia law, and they acknowledged it within their system. And that's what I really worry about, is that we then start bending the knee to these to these communities and say, oh, okay, if you've done that in Sharia law, then we can just kind of put it across into British law. I don't want to see that happening. I mean, Nuraya, you told some pretty horrendous stories about your time within the Sharia system. Are you okay now? I think you're thriving. I mean, I'm always seeing you on my social media. You're always fighting the good fight.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I live to tell the tale, thankfully, with my freedom intact, just by the skin of my teeth. So I do spend my time now just highlighting how dangerous it can be and saying, knowing one or two things about what Sharia actually means can save your life, essentially. Even something as small as a woman using the new laws they've got in Muslim countries in the courts that you do have the right to divorce, put that in your contract and you might save yourself from years of torment and potentially incarceration as well.
There you go. I always say it is the second generation that's always more amenable to this sort of thing, because they get very wistful about something they know nothing about. So it's always good to have your perspective on, because you've been through it. You've been in a Sharia law system and you didn't like it very much. Wow. Maybe because you're a woman, maybe because you're a sensible person. Nuraya Khan, thank you so much for joining us on the show. That's such an interesting insight, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say as well, I'm a devout Hindu, right? So Hinduism has this kind of dictum, which is basically the truth is one, but the wise speak of it in many different ways. So there's many ways of approaching. So if you say you're a Christian or a Jew or just an atheist, I still look at you as equally legitimate on your spiritual path and winding your way through life as I am. Whereas when you get to Islam and you get to Christianity as well, they believe that essentially either you're on the right path or you're on the wrong path. There is exclusivity of truth. Now, a Christian will say, look, they'll look at me perhaps, if they're a conservative Christian, they might look at me and say, look, Myron, you're probably just still, I'll pray to Christ that you find the light, right? That's what a conservative Christian might say. But an Islamist will look at me and say, you're an enemy of God. Right? It's the different tone that the supremacist
And we're talking about extreme Islamists here. And we're not talking about every Muslim person on the street, by the way.
No, but by definition, an Islamist, that's what we mean by Islamism. That's why I use that specific term, the Islamist. So a liberal or moderate Muslim wouldn't look at me in the same way. But an Islamist sees me as basically not only incorrect in my path, but an actual enemy, and actually as someone who is subordinate to the Muslim. And that's what we see in most extreme versions in ISIS and so on. And there's a verse in the Quran that says that makes the Christian and the Jew pay the jizya, the tax, and that if you're a polytheist, then essentially you should be killed. And so what happened with the Yazidis and with ISIS? They tried to make the Christians and Jews pay the tax, but the Yazidis, because they were seen as polytheists, were killed and their women taken as sex slaves. Now you have mandates in the Quran with that. Now a liberal Muslim and a moderate Muslim will look at that and say, look, that was meant for a different time. It's not relevant for now. They'll find new interpretations, all of that kind of stuff. But an Islamist will say, no, we must do what it says on the tin. We must take the literal interpretation. This is the final revelation, and we must follow it.
Look, I think the literal interpretation of any text has never led to anything good in the modern world, so I would really apply that theory to most things, and you're right. I think you know a lot about this, and it's interesting to hear sort of the comparison between different religions and how some do take it to the more extreme level and
it's all
others
about
don't.
interpretation.
It is all about interpretation. I wish we could all interpret the same way, but we don't. That's probably most of the world's issues are based on the wrong interpretation or the right interpretation or what you feel. Anyway, after the break, we are going to be talking about TikTok migrants coming on board, doing package deals, Dhaka to Dover, that and much more after these messages.